Welcome to Agriculture, Past, Present, and Future, presented by Fayette County Farm Bureau. I am Steve Walker, President of Fayette County Farm Bureau. Agriculture has been a major provider of jobs and income in Fayette County for 200 years. The first settlers who arrived found a land covered in forest with rich soil ideal for growing food for their survival. It took many years, a lot of hard labor, and a will to survive with Indian attacks, disease, and accidents. Within the following interviews, you will see the pioneer spirit continued on through the years, being passed from generation to generation. Each generation learned from the previous and continues on today. Agriculture has certainly changed in the past 200 years in Fayette County, from tilling the land with a hoe to horse and mule-drawn plows. A farmer with a horse-drawn plow could plow about 1 acre per day, working dawn to dusk, compared to today's tractors using a 6-bottom plow, which can till approximately 45 acres per day, and planters which can plant 60 acres per day or more. The average farm has grown from a few acres to 200 plus acres now. Modern animal producers have changed from a few animals to many animals, growing a safe, confined operation which provides nutritious food at reasonable cost to feed a growing world. Modern agriculture requires a good sense of business, a will to take risk each year, while keeping informed with the latest technology. For the past 100 years, Indiana Farm Bureau and Fayette County Farm Bureau have been and continues to support the agriculture business in Fayette County, whether it be beef, dairy cattle, hog, sheep, or crop operation, with lobbying efforts at the local, state, and federal levels of government to make sure our agriculture workers concerned are heard by our legislature. Fayette County Farm Bureau wants to say a special thanks to Kathy Sturgeon, Sue Ann Flum Walker, and especially neighbors and farmers who took their time to tell their story, along with John Pawsey and staff at Channel 3 in Connersville for work on this project. On behalf of the officers, board members, and members of Fayette County Farm Bureau, we thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentations as our neighbors talk of how agriculture has provided a means of support for them and their families, how agriculture has changed their lives, and how they are preparing the future for their children to continue the rural lifestyle and agriculture of Fayette County. Please sit back and enjoy as we present Agriculture, Past, Present, and Future.
Eons ago, this land, which we now call Fayette County, was the edge of the glaciers that covered the land up until 10 to 12,000 years ago. As they receded, various nomadic tribes of indigenous people called the Mound Builders started to inhabit this fertile land. They were from various tribes and labeled Eastern Woodlands. We called them the Potawatomi, the Miami, the Shawnee, and eventually the Delawares. They were hunters, gatherers, fishermen, and the first to sow the land with crops using fish heads as fertilizer. The first white men that they encountered included the French fur traders such as Michel Pelletier, who accompanied John Connor to the area. Also the French Jesuit priests such as Father Franz Joseph Rudolph, who came from Alsace-Lorraine to the New World. These black robes came as missionaries and circuit riders to bring the word of God to these tribes and the new settlers of the area. Many tribes were relocated in this Indiana territory as the government made treaties and purchases of their homelands. This area became available for white settlers because of the 12-mile purchase in 1809. The Delaware were pushed to the edge of this line and remained the tribe to be located in the area the longest, camping near what would later become the Mike Crowell Farm and the Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary. Following is the history of these first white settlers as their descendants tell the story about their heritage, their daily lives on the farms, their education and survival, their struggles through depression and wars, the technological changes of agriculture, and their hopes for the future.
I remember when down at Hawkinsville, which is just down the road from where we live, and they had a grocery store, and there was a house or two there, or three, maybe 3 or 4, maybe. but at a blacksmith shop, and I remember going down there with my dad when I was a little kid.
The farm has been under the Hubble family name since they arrived in Fayette County back in 1817. Been in Waterloo Township and some of Jennings Township, but mostly in Waterloo. That's where the farms have been located. Ever since 1940, there's been one certain part of the acreage has been in the same family since then. 1840, I'm sorry. Probably some of the original ground that was bought from the Hubble family was 160 acres. It was through the Cincinnati, Ohio land grant, and like I said, it was 160 acres. It was purchased for $20 an acre.
People that are familiar with the area, they will see Beeson Station Road. And the Beeson Station came from the Beeson family that migrated here. The station came from being part of the Underground Railroad. They were actually participated in that and would hide the black people as they were escaping from slavery, and became known as the railroad. And each one of the stops along the railroad was known as a station, and that's where the name Beeson Station Railroad came from.
The Hanson, Benjamin Hollis Hanson, who my dad, I guess, is named after, he came to Fayette County from Kentucky in the 1814 era, and he purchased land around the Alquina era. He bought the farm that I live on now, on Alquina Road. That farm was from a runaway slave named James Van Horn. His owner's son helped him escape, and he came up here to Fayette County and worked for several farmers until he saved enough money to buy, it was about 160 acres there on Alquina Road, and he built the house that I live in now. He was one of the most prominent farmers in Fayette County, and he later was able to make enough money to pay for his freedom, and he went back and paid for his freedom.
My family have been here for many years. My great-great-grandfather, John Elliott, came to Indiana. He was born in Culpeper County, Virginia in 1800 and moved here in about 1820. They settled along Wilson Creek, just on the south side of it.
Your dad took many children rides and had the sleigh bells, and they'd hear him coming.
We had 3 sets of sleigh bells.
That one of my fondest memories. When we were little, Steve was very little, but Sherry and I, every time it snowed, we'd be out in the front yard standing there. And I remember Dad said, "What are you girls doing?" And we were listening because we knew that Grandpa Branson, those sleigh bells, we could hear them from down where Steve lives now. And you could hear him coming down Alquina Road. Every time it snowed, he'd hook that up and come to give Sherry and I a ride. And I can't hear those sleigh bells ring today without thinking of that. It's one of the excitement and the glee with hearing those bells coming, because you knew he was coming to give you a ride.
Yeah, a lot of kids had their first experience with a horse and sleigh, and he gave it to them. There was no charge, of course, just all they wanted to do is just have a good time.
My Sam Scott, my granddad, he had the first thrashing rig out by the bird sanctuary that then when my dad on his own farm. And Sam was getting older, he took over the thrashing rig and brought it to Fayette County, Jennings Township.
The Merrill family moved to Indiana in 1900 from up north or east of Maysville, Kentucky. Came down the river on a barge, got off at Lawrenceburg, and they were going to raise tobacco at Orange.
I was born in the little town of Clarksburg. It's in Decatur County. My dad was working for a farmer he made $1 a day and a house and a milk cow. And during the Depression years, the farmer said, I can't afford $1, I'll have to cut you to 75 cents. And my dad said we can't make it on that, and that's when we moved to Fayette County. A farm south of Orange. My dad rented on thirds. He bought 80 acres in Connersville Township, north of the Mary Gray Bird Sanctuary. That's where I grew up.
My dad started farming in 1919 at Longwood.
Oliver Turner was the first, my great-great-grandfather was the first Turner to live in Fayette County. I believe he was born down around Nulltown. But as far as I know, he never owned any land in Fayette County. From what research I've done, I've not been able to find anything. I have a journal of his where he did day work for a lot of other farmers, and he also went back to Harrison, Indiana.
Isaac Powell came with his family in 1825. Then in 1833, he purchased 80 acres at the corner of Fairview, Posey, and Harrison Townships.
Back in the day when my father first started 4-H, he applied through the Kraft Corporation to receive a dairy animal, a Jersey, for the 4-H project. Well, when he got that, that's what started our registered Jersey herd. So during his 4-H years, he showed the Jersey calf, and it just kind of grew and grew, and we've milked Jerseys up till 2012.
I got started as a child. We live in the home currently today that my great-grandparents built the home, and there's never been anyone but family ever live in there. This was through the Florys, so we were about 3 generations down from those that came. They started out with the Beesons, then the Thomases, Florys, then it went on to the Stars, and then we're the 5th, and being another star involved there.
Which is kind of confusing because we have all these names involved, but we have to talk about it that way because really the women are the ones that took the information and really continued with the interest of the farm and saw to it that things were carried on and the information passed on to the next generation, to the next generation.
They tried everything they could to get me from being a farm girl. I was not allowed around the equipment. I did show the cattle, and then I ended up showing horses, but I was not allowed on the tractors, which broke my heart because I had so many friends that were these cool farm girls that could get on. They were talking about driving their tractors and helping out their daddies and stuff, and I couldn't.
Little store called Ozzy's, where all the farmers went every day and hung out and swapped stories and
every day.
Drank a Coke and
Played cards.
A lot of memories in Ozzy's store. That was part of the farm day. Every day you'd go to Ozzy's around 10 o'clock. Sometimes twice a day you went to Ozzy's.
This is about a year old when the folks moved to Bentonville. And that would have been 1926. And I stayed there 82 years. Couldn't get away from Bentonville. So, we farmed, milked cows, raised hogs, had big gardens. Pretty much self-sufficient as far as food was concerned.
Well, the milking was a daily morning and evening chore. So farmers worked 7 days a week. And it was a never ending. There's always something to do. You know, it's not an 8-hour day. In those days it wasn't, certainly. and my brother and I would go down to bring the cows up from the pasture, and they'd be waiting usually because they wanted to be milked. And then one of the jobs that I had was to put feed out after the cows were in the stanchions before they'd start the milking, and I'd have a can, a coffee can. In those days, coffee cans were squatty, and I'd know how much I was supposed to give each cow.
We didn't have no electric or indoor plumbing, but I didn't know any difference. I thought everybody was like that. We got our first electric when we moved to Connersville Township. Dad moved there. He wired the house.
Well, all farm boys had to work. I didn't have time for homework.
We farmed. I was born in 1927, and we farmed like many individual farmers did in that day. We had horses, we had cattle, we had hogs. As a child, I went with my dad to do a lot of things. Since I was an only child, I went to the woods to bring in the cattle. At night, I would wait for him to come in from the field that I could ride the horses down to the water trough and back into the barn and try not to bump my head. I'd be around when he was cracking corn at night to feed the cattle, feed the hay to the horses.
Well, the earliest memory was with Grandpa. I used to ride the elevator in the wagon. He'd take a load of ear corn to Bentonville to the elevator, get it ground in the livestock feed. We had chickens. I used to have to gather the eggs and clean out the chicken house. And the outhouse was out behind the chicken house. They had to go through the chicken yard to get to the outhouse. Once in a while, the old rooster decided to chase you a little bit, so we went to the bathroom a little faster that way.
That was my first 4-H project, and as we had some sheep, but they weren't show material, so we got some from my aunt and uncle, and they was named Sally and Diane, and I'm not going to tell you why, but that's another story.
Everything that was electric at that time, when we ended up with a washer and a dryer, an electric stove, and an electric refrigerator instead of the ice box, and the porcelain box hanging out on the window to keep the stuff cold, and a TV. And that created quite a social event on a Saturday afternoon and night. The neighbors all come in, and it was quite the deal. Popcorn and watching TV.
Free admission, don't forget.
Yeah. But anyway, and the TV was a huge, about the size of a pie pan, a small pie pan.
Yeah.
And that was kind of when the electric come into play in the 48.
I was a 4-H member for 10 years. My kids were always members of 4-H. My grandkids was all members, and last year my great-grandson showed for the first time a little bit.
He's only 5 though.
He's only 5, but he started. All the time I never showed on the 14 acres because they didn't have that then. That was Uncle's cornfield. We showed in the Liberty Building.
I grew up on a mini farm in Harrison Township on the EB addition on top of 30th Street Hill. We were one of the first houses on EB Drive and a few hundred yards from the EB barn where I grew up playing softball and cowboys and Indians in the EB woods. Hide and seek in his home where he used to hide runaway slaves before the Civil War. Also on his property behind my house was the remnants of a spirit mound built by the mound builders who used the higher ground as part of their Indian trail into the Whitewater Valley and down to the Connors Trading Post based on the river.
My mom lived to be 103. She canned everything that she could get her hands on. When we cleaned her basement out after she passed away, I bet we found 200 cans in her basement.
I always used to say, if there's going to be a disaster, I'm going to Mom's basement because I know we'll have plenty of food.
Mom and Dad bought this farm during Depression. Paid $200 down. And so Dad got a job driving a school bus to help pay on the farm.
We had a huckster that went by, and she would sell eggs to him sometimes. A huckster is like a little grocery cart truck affair, and Mr. Fiersick was his name. And I was so excited when once in a while I would get to go in and look and see and have a penny to get a piece of candy or something out of his truck. And so that was different. And otherwise, all the produce and things that we raised on the farm, we were pretty self-sufficient, other than coffee and sugar and flour. We had to purchase those. And at wartime, I'm told this story, of course I wasn't born yet, but they required people to, in order to get ration books, you had to turn in what you had already on hand. So my father went to the area where Mother stored all the canned products and counted every can, every jar of jelly, and she'd canned meat and everything, and turned all that in. Well, they said that he turned in more than anybody in Orange Township, and the ration books were issued with no stamps, just the covers was all they got. So the next period around, they did get some ration books, but he sort of shot himself in the foot on that one because he smoked and he couldn't get any tobacco.
Milkweed was what I remember the most.
Yeah, milkweed was.
To make parachutes.
Yeah, they'd come around, I guess the county agent or somebody would bring them sacks around and leave them off, and we'd go around and pick up the milkweeds, the pods, and they made parachutes out of them. And gas was rationed, you remember that. And you could only get so many stamps for sticker A, and if you had a pickup truck, you could get, you got a T sticker, and you could get more tickets to buy gas. And then, of course, the tractor, I think you could get all you wanted for your tractor. Of course, I think a few guys might have took a little bit of the tractor gas and put it in their car. I'm not real sure. Then you could only get one pair of shoes a year. And
ladies couldn't buy stockings. They painted on their legs.
And a lot of us went barefooted most of the time in the summertime.
Dad always farmed with horses, and he had a couple colts every year, and he would let the colts run loose when we went to the field. If we shucked corn, why, the colts would run right along their mother, and it was called Farm Bureau Lumber Company. That was, the Farm Bureau owned a lumber company. That was behind, it was in back, where the silos are now. It's all the way in the back.
The first tractor that I know of that my grandfather owned after the horses was an oil-pulled Rumley, and I do have a photo of that. And they used that with the threshing. They belonged to a threshing ring.
The old tractors that my father and grandfather bought in about 1963, we upgraded to Minneapolis Jetstar 3, which was a 3-bottom plow, which, you know, I was probably close to 9, 10 years old, and I was in seventh heaven with a tractor like that, new tractor and plow.
Now, another thing, Steve was with his dad and grandpa almost constantly farming. And you started driving a tractor when you were how old? 3? No. Fourth grade?
4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, 4 or 5. He wanted to stay home and plow. And he was going to plow with one tractor, and Bill with the other. And so Bill called his school teacher and said, Steve won't be to school today because she says, well, oh, is he sick? And Bill said, yes, he has tractor fever. She got a big kick out of that.
Well, the steam engine itself, we run it with coal. It was a lot hotter than wood, but then that also took a lot of water. And we had a 500-gallon tank mounted on the wagon. And most of the farm wells around that time, you couldn't pump 500 gallons out of them or you'd drain it dry. So our job was, boys' job, was taking over to what we used to call Kennedy's Orchard on Route 1. And the slab creeks down through that road there. Well, we just pull up and my dad had fixed up a pump on the tractor and we'd get our water out of the slabs, creeks. So that was an everyday occurrence while we were thrashing to go over early and fill up the tank with 500 gallons. That would last us during the day.
The house where I live originally sat back on the riverbank of the Whitewater River, straight west of where it is now. My dad was born in 1884, and he says in 1889, when he was 5, they decided to move the house straight east to the side of the new road. Yes, when they moved the house, my dad was 5, and he said he sat on the back doorstep. They put the house on a sled and brought it across the field with a team of horses, or 2 teams, I don't know, and sat it on this cellar that they had dug.
I remember going with my dad to a sale, and they couldn't sell tractors, but they could sell a bale of hay. So they'd put a bale of hay on a drop bar, and they'd sell the bale of hay and give you the tractor.
You could get tractors, but you had to get a permit. Okay, and if you got a new tractor, you couldn't sell it. Okay, because you had to keep it, because I guess there'd be too much, I guess they call it black market now, there'd be too many shady deals going on.
But you could sell bales of hay.
Yeah, you could put a bale of hay on there and sell the bale of hay for $500 or $1,000.
And give them a tractor.
You got the tractor, but you actually bought a bale of hay.
They put in the water heater and bathroom commode and lavatory we had several years, and then finally we got a bathtub in 1952. And I would have been 10 years old. So before that, baths were taken in an old galvanized tub brought into the kitchen. And you didn't take a bath every day, obviously, because that was a big deal. Otherwise, you just washed at the wash basin.
Well, after the thrashing machines and things like that kind of went by the wayside, and then the next step in our generation, I guess, was the tractors. And my grandfather bought I think it was a 1948 Minneapolis Z tractor with a 2-bottom plow, probably a disc. And about that time, my father, and I think it was in 49 or 50, he bought a E3 Co-op, and it had cultivators and sickle bar mower and a hay rake and just all the attachments that you'd want. And I still remember using them tractors when I was a kid. So they used them a long time. I've still got both them old tractors that my grandfather and father first purchased, so trying to restore some of them now.
Conservation, as we came into it and started, we began and got exposed with no-till and began adopting that and adapting it to our production. And we've adopted a lot of your buffer strips and things to keep soil in place and using no-till pretty extensively.
Oh, I know. We have livestock out there in the ground. That's something.
Yeah. People ask us today if we have livestock. We used to host schools to come out and bring their elementary kids to visit a farm, and the first thing they want to see is, where's the livestock?
Where's the animals?
Where's
And
the animals?
Brad's comment is, well,
They're all below ground because the livestock that we farm today is how we take care of the soils. So all the micronutrients and the microorganisms that are living below the soil, earthworms and all, are what we need to take care of primarily for us today.
Later, things were made, improvements were made. In that particular house, they put in the first bathroom in 1920. They put in a furnace in 1921. We had Delco as an electric system. Delco was something that was powered by batteries, and every morning my dad went out and fired up a gasoline engine to charge this long series of batteries. It was only 32 volt, but we had electric, we had lamps, we had electric iron. But it was in later years when we remodeled again, tore out all the 32 volt lines, of course. The Rushville, southeastern Indiana, came in about 1933 or 4 and put in a line that came across the river through Orange and on across to our road. And that was, of course, 120 volt.
Dad got interested as a young boy with shorthorn cattle. There's 3 domestic breeds, they call them English breeds, and that's Shorthorn, Angus, and Hereford, and he chose the Shorthorn. And I ran across a certificate when I was looking for things. He became a member of the American Shorthorn Association when he was 14 years old. And he tells a story about going down, his mom driving him down to Brookville. There was a Shorthorn breeder down in Brookville, and that's where he bought his first Shorthorn heifer. And he just continued with the breed. He had several hundred head of cattle, actually. He was a director of the American Shorthorn Association and judged all over the nation, too, at all the big stock shows. He would get on the thing back then in the 40s and 50s, whereas they would get on the trains and here at the station, usually in January, and he'd be gone all winter long, and they would have the Chicago Stockyard Show, Kansas City, Denver, Houston, Fort Worth. I think there was one in Arizona and in Pennsylvania, and they just made the circuit. They lived on the trains and traveled, and there's been many young men at the time that are still living here in Fayette County that talk about traveling on the trains with my dad and stuff.
Well, we was in rural youth, and I was in Fayette County's rural youth, and she was in Rush County rural youth. And when we got together for a meeting of the district or whatever it was, I met her, asked her to go out with me, and she did and still is.
We met at Rural Youth. Rural Youth was an organization for single 18 to 24-year-olds, and this happened to be Fayette County was having a dance that night. And I was from Rush County, and several of us came over to Fayette County to the dance. And I met Keith at the dance. And I always said I would never, ever marry anybody from Connorsville or marry a dairy farmer. That just wasn't cool for Rush County people. But guess what? We got married. And I told my dad I met someone from, and he said, "Oh, who is he? What's he do?" And well, he's from Connorsville. And guess what he does? He's a dairy farmer. Well, my dad had a big laugh out of that. But almost 35 years we'll be married, and I couldn't ask for a better guy.
And the funny thing is, my father also had to go to Rush County to find his wife.
In rural youth.
In rural youth.
Had the good fortune to be on the livestock judging team at Harrisburg, and we went to the state one year, and I had the good fortune to be the top beef judge in the state contest one year. And I guess it kind of all came from that, the love of judging cattle. And then when our children got old enough to be in 4-H, why, it just caused us to be more involved in the beef than any other projects, even though we had hogs and raised lots of them.
Oh boy, at the beginning of our farming occupation or business, it was not very easy, but I didn't know any better because I came from the city, and I was madly in love, and I thought everything was going hunky-dory, but I knew we didn't have much money, and so we ran a budget, and we lived in the town of Harrisburg, right across from the Harrisburg School, in Brad's grandmother's little house, because she had just passed away like the year before. So that house was still available. We were living in there, and I went over to the Harrisburg store to just buy some essentials, I thought, like a draining dish drainer and a mop, and I was all excited because I got to buy something, and he told me, you just need to take those back.
Those aren't in the budget.
They aren't in the budget.
The boy was named Manlove. He lived up right south of Bentonville, and I can't forget his first name. But
Manlove was his last name.
And it's like I say, it was a 2-month course, and we took animal husbandry, but we did do a crop rotation, and one of the professors wanted to know why I didn't plant soybeans. I said, because nobody around my house plants soybeans. And the only soybeans that was planted then was 3 or 4 farmers used them for end rows on their cornfield. Made hay out of it, but anyhow, there's probably more soybeans planted now than there was corn. So that's definitely changed in the last 50 to 60 years. We went from no soybeans to a lot of soybeans.
Well, right out of high school, I was all set to go to Vincennes University at a junior college just for agriculture. Learn more about farming, come back, take over the farm. But in that period of time, my dad had quite a bit of back trouble. And right after I graduated, he decided he was going to have some back surgery. So that kind of eliminated my going to college. So I pretty much ran the farm, done all the milking and harvesting and everything the year I got out of high school. And that kind of put a whammy on my college career. But I did get to go to Purdue short course a year or 2 after that. And it was a course where kids could go in nothing but agricultural courses, in which I done a lot of, just the general management type courses.
Yeah, the reason I remember when, because I was up at Purdue taking the short course, and when we was in one of the classes, we had to look over some combines there, and I was admiring how they kept their combines clean up at Purdue after they harvested a crop. That thing looked like brand new. And I told them that I just bought a half interest in a John Deere self-propelled combine. Had 10-foot head. I thought that was a big combine. That was big stuff when I drove that thing. And then a few years ago we went out to Iowa to a museum, and they had a John Deere 45 in the museum. It looked like a toy compared to today's equipment.
I had 2 very key professors at my time at Purdue, and one was Bruce McKenzie, and he taught ag engineering and grain systems management. He was on the forefront of designing a lot of the grain systems that we see, not just here in the United States, but around the world, because at that point in time, we were transitioning from ear corn and picking it and putting it in cribs into shelling the corn and storing them in grain bins. And so he designed all that, and his coursework there, I just took to heart.
Well, people don't farm like they used to, and distance means nothing. The two people that farm my acreage there, one lives in Dallas, Texas, and one lives in Detroit. One drives in, one flies in. Not many farmers today travel that far, but they're here to farm family land, and where I lived also. So it's a whole different world.
Given what we saw coming in the margins and things are going to be thin for a few years, that we felt we would be better served putting capital resources towards developing a pumpkin operation for our business here instead of trying to grow just more acres and the grain system there. So
the secretary of the association was very gracious. He remembered my dad, and he allowed me to get some cattle registered, bring it up to where they could be, when they have calves, they could be pretty close to purebred. Shorthorn cattle don't have to be purebred anymore. They're 15th, 16ths, because another reason why Dad got out of the cattle showing in the late 60s, early 70s is they were changing the type. They went from these short, dumpy, sorry Dad, cattle to, they introduced the exotic breeds like the Anjou, the Charolais, the Limousine, to add height and more leanness to the meat quality. And Dad just could not see himself showing these types of creatures.
Well, it's a pretty good life. You're your own boss. If you want to take off and go somewhere, you know, if you don't have a crop waiting in the field, you can take off and go. Now, when it comes harvest time, you don't take off for anything. You're out there 12 or 16 hours a day. And but it's a pretty good life. I don't know whether I would do it again or not. They got pretty lean there for a while when we first got them. Well, about the time we had kids, wasn't it?
And bought farms.
Yeah, we started buying ground.
It's just changed so much from even when I started, now alone when he started. So it's,
I remember that.
It's went, you know, we can do more in a day than what we, you know, what most people farmed back then and the whole season. So it's just with the computers and GPSs and stuff like that, that's just changed tremendously. So.
It's automatic steer too, isn't it?
Yes.
Gosh, I remember in
So-
that combine it'd be 100 degrees and you were just sweating. Now you got air conditioning. It's a lot different.
I think it was 90s. We had ended up with 3 grand champion cows at the Indiana State Fair. I think in 2000 we ended up with another one, so we've had 4 grand champion cows at the Indiana State Fair in a period of time. In 1995, probably the highest peak of our showing careers, we took 3 animals to the All-American show in Louisville, Kentucky, which is the largest Jersey show in the nation. And we took 3 cows. We had a first, a second, and a 4th place cow down there. We had intermediate premier performance cow, that is when they take the numbers of the bull, registered bulls, and the production of the cow and all their pedigrees and put it together, and they said that was the best cow down there. So I was quite proud of that. We've sold cows South America, Brazil. I think one of them went to India. A lot of them's been to Canada, and then all over the United States.
I want to say this. A lot of things I'm proud of, but the 2 most things is going to Washington, D.C. on the honor flight and carrying the torch on the last bicentennial. And the 5.5 years I spent in service, I grew up. I went from a boy to a man, I guess.
where we're going with the information age hasn't even started to bloom yet, and it's going to be scary. And I'm going to enjoy watching it happen and being on the phase out, because there's going to be generations coming they're going to have to adapt it quickly.
Well, and the computer imaging that we've been able to work with, taking, just doing fertility soil maps, that's kind of what we started with, but then you harvest off of that, and then you begin to build layers and layers of information.
Plans are, my son, I believe he wants to come back to farm. I think it's just the timing of it. When he getting himself worked in, and when he feels like he can come back and financially take over, I think it will. He's got a son now, so hopefully it'll continue.
Dad, with his breeding program, he bred everything, pretty much either by hand, like where they bring the show heifer to the bull, did it that way, or turn the bull out to the herd. And he did start AI right towards the end. But when I got into it, of course, AI and artificial insemination was real important and going strong. In embryos, flushing for embryos, that was real popular, started to get popular, and we did that some. Had pretty good luck with it. And now they're doing the in vitro fertilization like they do for people, where they put it all in a petri dish, and they can sex the semen now. And so all this costs anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 per calf.
People are any smarter than they ever were, but they just build on each other and what someone else has done, add to it. So, but computer technology, then that just advanced things a lot faster. At least that's my philosophy.
The farming has been turned over to our son Steve, who runs the operation with help from Bill, because, as you know, farmer never retires.
It's probably as rough as it's ever been. I told a class of high schoolers back in probably the 80s that anybody could get started farming with a lot of work and a few acres. Now I'm not sure that's true. I think you've got to be in the right place at the right time, either get involved with a farmer that's about to retire, and take over from him, or it's just tough, to get started farming right now with all the major capital and stuff that you have to invest in equipment and land. It's just tremendous.
I think agriculture is in a dynamic time, and I believe that we're going to see more changes in the next 5 to 10 years than we've seen the previous 100. And it's mind-boggling, some of the things that are coming down the pike on us.
I just want to thank you for letting us tell our story. I know I'm blessed.
I am Sarah Elliott Lee Plow. I live in Connersville Township.
I'm Bob Nobby.
Darlene Nobby.
Penny and Pat Suman, representing the Powell and Suman families.
This is my wife Kay, daughter Beth, son Steve, and our other daughter Sherry is busy working.
My name is Leslie Grubbs. This is my wife Opal Grubbs.
Hi, I'm Grace Turner Clifford. I'm the 4th generation of Turners to own land in Orange Township in Fayette County. And I'm proud to be here to represent the Turner family. My ancestors have all preceded me, and there's no one else. I'm the Lone Ranger.
I'm Edwin Kerr, live in Harrison Township. And someone from my background came in 1820 and acquired, I think it was 2 sections and probably 160 acres.
My name's Gene Scott. I was born in 1934, and we lived in Jennings Township, southeast. And originally, My grandfather come up from Nicholsville. His name was Sam Scott. And they had a farm over by the bird sanctuary where my dad was born. And then eventually, when he got married, he bought the Leif Cockafair farm and he built the house, and that's where we homesteaded at till later life.
My name's Melinda Hanson Taylor. I'm the daughter of Marilyn and Hollis Hanson.
I grew up in Posey Township. I'm the daughter of George and Bernice Flum. I went to Bentonville School and then on to Connersville School.
My name is Keith Hubble. This is my wife, Lois.
James Flum. I was born in Waterloo Township on a green farm in 1931, November 30th, 1931.
I'm Kenneth Joseph Flum, and I was born in 1940 and lived on that same farm, the green farm in Waterloo Township.
Hi, I'm Brad Starr, and happy to be here today. And this is my wife, Patty.
Hi. I am Kathy Doyle Sturgeon, daughter of Alvin and Verena Rudolph Doyle.
I'm Randy Crone, and I serve as president of Indiana Farm Bureau. We're an organization made up of 72,000 farm families across Indiana, including many farmers in Fayette County. I want to take a moment to offer my congratulations to Fayette County on your 200th year. That is such an impressive milestone. At Indiana Farm Bureau, we're also celebrating a big anniversary. 2019 marks our 100th year. Indiana Farm Bureau was founded in 1919 to secure better commodity prices and increase representation for farmers and rural communities in our legislature. Indiana Farm Bureau has a presence in all 92 counties. Our volunteer members run programs to advocate for agriculture and to educate the public about our industry. Fayette County is no exception. Our members in your great county put a lot of effort into communicating the value of agriculture to their friends, neighbors, and elected officials. I'm proud of all that our members do to support their local communities and county as a whole. And I'm proud to join Fayette County Farm Bureau in wishing Fayette County a happy 200th anniversary. And on behalf of all of us here at Indiana Farm Bureau, congratulations.